Question number 3, Phil Twyford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Minister responsible for Housing New Zealand Corporation. Does he agree with the National Business Review, who asked, is the government's social housing privatisation policy in tatters?
Honourable Bill
Mr
English.
Speaker, no, the government does not have a social housing privatisation policy. And following the member's question, I've looked at the article in question, which is particularly ill-informed. We have a plan that means that the nearly $2 billion that taxpayers spend each year on direct housing support will provide better results for tenants, more social houses and better houses. And the NBR, along with the Labor Party and the Greens, are the only people in New Zealand who believe that the way we do state housing now can't be improved. We believe it can be improved.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Is he aware that the Waikato Times this morning says that his State House sell-off, and I quote, smacks of desperation, no, sorry, that's deception, unquote, because of his, quote, lack of candour and camouflaging of its intention behind comforting references to the Salvation Army? And if so, is this just another example of them being wrong and him being right?
Honourable Bill English, either of
Mr.
those
Speaker,
two questions.
Yes, I do disagree with the Waikato Times. And as the government releases more and more information about the sorry state of state housing, they will certainly not be able to accuse the government of lack of candour. We will have been and will be completely open about the policy, completely open about the information, and that, of course, allows people to ask us questions and to shape the policy. And that is what we will continue to do, as we've been doing in public consultation over the last 6 weeks, where that consultation was constructive, informative and insightful, including in Dunedin.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Is he aware that the Salvation Army says that the lives of tenants would not be improved by his State House sell-off? And if so, how will gouging Housing New Zealand as a cash cow for $220 million in tax and dividends, as this morning's Dominion Post notes, how will that improve the lives of thousands of vulnerable Kiwi families living in garages and campgrounds?
Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I think the member has pointed exactly to what needs to change. So here we have the Labor Party saying there's thousands of vulnerable families living in carriages and campgrounds. Let's keep them there. Let's leave it exactly how it is. We, however, find that intolerable when we have $18 billion of assets and $2 billion of subsidies. So we think we should get people out of campgrounds and garages, and that's what this policy will do.
Order. Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Does he accept the Dominion Post's view that he, and I quote, stumbles on sowing confusion and doubt, unquote, with his housing policy, and that his government is having trouble finding buyers for the state houses it wants to sell? It's also having trouble deciding what social housing will look like, who will run it and who will benefit. And if so, will he be asking Crosby Textor for a refund?
Order. Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, no, I disagree with the Dominion Post. As the member pointed out before, when there are thousands of people in garages, campgrounds and overcrowded houses, we cannot stand by and allow that to continue. He wants to argue to keep them there. We want to argue to change it. And there's broad agreement in the community housing sector that these policies are the best opportunity in a generation to change it.
Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Which statement best describes his government's State House sell-off? Quote, Typical third-term government's overreach into fringe policies, that was NBR, or not a triumph of governance or policy making, perhaps National's third term will be just a muddle. That was the Dominion Post.
Honourable Bill English.
Mr. Speaker, no, none of those statements. Some of the statements, though, that describe the benefits of our policy were statements made by that member in a speech last year to the Community Housing Association, supporting the policy before his leader got to him and told him to oppose it.
Order. 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 Supplementary question, Phil Twyford.
Why doesn't he just adopt the well-balanced and well-considered policies outlined by the Labor housing spokesperson in a well-publicised speech aimed at growing the community housing sector, large-scale urban development, and building actual houses for people to live in? And why doesn't he drop his own half-baked policy to flick off thousands of state houses to property speculators and property developers?
Order. Honourable Bill English.
Because, Mr. Speaker, we need to get results very shortly, and we can't wait round to follow the model that member has supported, which did work 50 years ago, but does not work today. That's why we don't adopt his policies, because they won't work. And that's why iwi, community groups, developers and people who want to redevelop their communities and get a better result for their tenants are working with the government every single day to make sure that this policy can be put into place. And that member knows when he talks to those groups, they support the government policy because they're sick of seeing thousands of people in garages, overcrowded houses and caravan parks, and governments who did nothing about it.
Question number 4, Nook Karako.
Te mana whakawa.